this is the highest yielding stablecoin on Aerodrome Finance. It's like that for a reason. There's obviously risk associated with this token. If you were to ever see some of these private loans default in the background, then you would see a DPEG, much like we saw with USDC when the Silicon Valley Bank defaulted.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of WAGME TV. We have a fun one for you today. We are talking about the highest yield pool on Aerodrome Finance. So we're talking USDz and the interesting backing of it, which is around real world assets and how that is kind of mirroring what's going on in the broader market with larger companies like Blackrock. So we're going to talk in detail about the yields, the pool, and break everything down for you today so you can have all the information you need. As a quick reminder, this is not financial advice for educational and entertainment purposes only. So definitely do your own research, but we're excited to dive a little deeper. So with that, I'll kick it over to you, Ev.
Yeah, appreciate that, Sia. And yeah, like you said, this is the highest yielding stablecoin pool, or one of the highest on Aerodrome. And so what we wanted to talk about today was USDz, which is a little different than some of the other stablecoins we've covered on this channel. And the reason for that is that this is actually backed by real world assets, and its yields are coming from real world assets as well. So yeah, just looking over here on Aerodrome Finance, what you're seeing here is an APR of 26%, and that's with a TVL of 36 million. So, that's really a great return with, a large TVL, which is really what you're looking for in the security aspect of the liquidity pools that you're going to be delegating to. And so, yeah, this is a pretty interesting project. It's somewhat new. It's only been around for really the last year or two, and USDz as a token has only been out for a couple months now. And so we wanted to dive in and talk about what they use to back this, and why we find it so interesting. And to do that, what we want to talk about first is some of the other projects in the crypto space that are using real world assets to essentially get yield for users, and why USDz has differentiated itself from that. So Mata, I think I'll kick it over to you, and maybe we can talk about some of the work that Blackrock has done in the past.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in general, right, with BlackRock, it's really just a new era of high yield earning, right? What are we actually utilizing to back some of these coins and stable coins that we're looking at that are driving that yield? And so it's really validated not just by some of the stuff that's going on the DeFi side and some of the stuff that's going on the Aerodrome side, but also organizations like BlackRock, right? They have a new fund out. It's called, I think it's BUIDL, BUIDL, right? And it's essentially a tokenized fund that's created by BlackRock that operates on the Ethereum blockchain, really to offer US dollar yields through tokenization. So in a very similar fashion to what Evan was just running through there. It's really BlackRock's first foray into tokenized securities, which really lets qualified investors, which we'll get into in a minute, buy shares represented by digital tokens in a fund that holds generally what you would call safer assets. So 100% of the total assets of the fund that are invested in cash, US Treasury bills, and repurchase agreements, which is a really interesting thing to start to look through. So, right, this is BlackRock kind of taking a leap into this space, obviously bringing some major innovations along with it that is kind of disrupting what traditional finance typically looks like, right? It could really fundamentally transform a lot of capital markets here moving forward, and we're watching it be taken hold by some of these really big players in real time, right? So I think what's interesting about this, right, is of course they're investing in cash, they're investing in U.S. Treasury bills, things that we've heard before, right? The most interesting portion is those repurchase agreements and really bringing some of those real world assets into backing some of these coins themselves, which is what we'll get into in a minute here. But the downside of something like this from a BlackRock, right, is that it's only qualified investors. So I believe the minimum investment right now is $5 million that you have to put into it. And because they're, investing in a couple different other spaces along with repurchase agreements, I'm assuming you're not going to get as much of a yield from these as you would from some of these areas on the Aerodrome side. So, of course, a little bit less risky, but you have to put tons more money into it. So what is the average individual going to do with that? Pretty much nothing, right? So that's what opens things like, Aerodrome and USDz up for a lot of, interest from kind of your normal retail investors. So yeah, anything to add to that around BlackRock or maybe some of the other players?
Yeah, I think that's a great breakdown, and I think the biggest point there is just the validation of that. This is something that arguably one of the biggest financial institutions in the world is considering and taking into account. And yeah, I mean, a couple of things. So like one of the things that's really interesting that I was reading up on is Larry Fink did an interview about like the decision to do this. And his like ultimate view is for kind of the, higher net worth clients, large institutions, folks who have 5 mil above, way more than that as well. He's viewing the tokenization mechanism as a way to kind of customize a financial strategy or a wealth strategy to each individual. And you allow for instantaneous settlement, right? There's no like, hey, let's wait for this real estate property, to close over a 180-day period. With the Ethereum blockchain and with the tokenization of real world assets, there's instantaneous settlement, which for them they see as a competitive advantage if they're able to kind of pull this together. And then obviously, USDz would be the same in terms of instantaneous settlement since it's on the blockchain as well. But he views that kind of more from a like wider scale perspective, what they want to do down the line. And it's been interesting to see like other companies like Franklin Templeton Investments has a government money fund that's on chain. FOBXX is the ticker. And there's also another one called Ondo Finance, and they do a USD yield that's based on real world assets as well. And they have like 281 million under management. Right now, BlackRock is the biggest fund, and it recently launched. So it's kind of picked up steam pretty quickly. And it seems like it's part of the company's wider strategy. And it's a trend that seems like is going to keep going in that direction in terms of the tokenization of RWAs.
Yeah, I mean, that was great. I think the one thing that I love what you said there is how they're customizing essentially the assets that are backing these tokens. And that really pulls us into USDz here because while it's still a very new coin, what they're able to do is change the type of risk profile you want these tokens to be backed by. And that's going to increase the yield. Obviously, more risk, you're going to have more yield. And so what I wanted to do really quick was also just talk about essentially the current landscape of stable coins and how we're going to do that is we're going to run through the different categories that I kind of see stable coins falling into. And so one of the biggest things that we've seen in crypto is that firms like Circle and USDT don't offer any yield to their customers, and they're able to pocket that as profit essentially. And so I think last year on USDT, if they held all of their assets in 5% treasuries, they were able to come away after the year end with $5 billion in profit. And so that's a lot of value that could be returned to coin holders. And I think that's really what USDz is trying to do. And so, yeah, so if you were to look at this chart, on-chain versus off-chain, obviously non-yield bearing stablecoins. We have DAI as an on-chain stablecoin. When you look at off-chain, USDC and USDT easily stand out as the two biggest examples in that quarter category. With yield-bearing stablecoins, which I think is still pretty new, at least in the last few years to crypto, you're seeing EUSD, USD Plus, other stablecoins that we've talked about on this channel before, whether that's Reserve Protocol or Overnight Finance that runs those tokens. And so with off-chain, USDz is really the first one we've talked about on this channel, and why we think it's so interesting is that we're able to see a lot of this private credit be used for yield. And so, yeah, what I wanted to do is essentially just talk about, why this is important. Like you guys said, these are private credit markets coming into crypto and offering yield, which is something we haven't seen before. And so that's like, going to be through corporate loans, through real estate loans, through peer-to-peer loans. These are the ways that banks are essentially offering loans. And to continue this further, Ansen Finance, the creators of USDz, actually already had a version 1 of their protocol. They wanted to do a test run of essentially how USDz was going to work. And so they created this token called PCT. PCT. And so this token was backed by a senior secured real estate loan, which I think is something, we haven't seen any stablecoins in crypto being backed by something like this. And so while this is slowly finishing up and you're able to actually now transform your PCT tokens into USDz tokens, you're going to see a similar backing with USDz. And so, I guess when we kind of come back to the beginning, this is the highest yielding stablecoin on Aerodrome Finance. It's like that for a reason. There's obviously risk associated with this token. If you were to ever see some of these private loans default in the background, then you would see a depeg, much like we saw with USDC when the Silicon Valley Bank defaulted. The USDC depegged, and that would be a very similar outcome. So there's obviously always risks with these tokens, but I think we just wanted to highlight how cool it is that we're seeing, private credit and real world assets being used to provide yield for stable coins within crypto. So yeah, you guys got any thoughts on that?
No, I just think it's a really exciting niche in kind of the DeFi market. I feel like it just seems like the next natural evolution of it, right? DeFi has been around for quite some time, and now it's trying to figure out what's the best way to kind of provide a high but also reliable yield that's backed by something other than something on the blockchain, right? And I think that it's been hard to figure out how to do that, but it seems like USDz is coming up with a way to do that and make it accessible to your everyday investor or crypto head.
Yeah, and I think it's fun to also see some of these big players kind of giving a nod to DeFi. Like, okay, you did have some really good ideas. Maybe we should start to think about how we can implement those and utilize those as well. I think USDz, obviously, BlackRock's fund, they're baby steps, right? But I would say they're significant, right? Even though they're quite small, right? It's the greater society really starting to embrace blockchain technology. It's us really starting to understand what the tokenization of some of these assets can look like and how that's going to play out for us in the future. So could really reshape the investment landscape for all of us, not just those who have $5 million, but of course, everybody, all the retail investors and everything like that. So I'm really interested to see kind of the impacts that this has just in general on the investment landscape and traditional finance too. So
love it. Great thoughts from everybody. Great breakdown. And if you guys like what you heard here, please like, comment, subscribe. We're always trying to give you guys the latest on, yields, different projects, recently covering a lot of Aerodrome, but we always love hearing the comments below on, your stances, what you want to see us cover. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe to stay updated on everything we're going to bring you. And until next week, WAG me.